In a minimal room where light enters with an almost sacred solemnity, a woman pours milk from a thick jug into an earthenware bowl, and in that humble gesture Johannes Vermeer distills one of the most silent miracles in the history of art. The Milkmaid, painted around 1658, a work that transforms everyday action into an act of eternity and demonstrates that the greatness of painting does not reside in heroes or myths, but in the luminous patience of the ordinary. A master from Delft, whose life was marked by the slowness of his production and the depth of his gaze, chose as his protagonist not a wealthy lady nor a poetic muse, but a flesh and blood maidservant, a woman whom the social world of her time would have considered irrelevant, but whom he portrays as a pillar of dignity, concentration, and inner rhythm. Her inclined posture, the strength of her arms, the robustness of her figure, and the absolute concentration of her gaze reveal a respect for manual labor that few painters had expressed with such delicacy. Nothing in her is decorative, everything is essential. The simplicity of the gesture, the resistance of the hard bread on the table, the roughness of the wall, the contained shine of the ceramics, and the light that spills over the scene as if blessing each object. Vermeer's technique reaches here a clarity that borders on the divine. The painter understood light as living matter, and in The Milkmaid he lets it enter through the left window, breaking into thousands of nuances on the surfaces. The intense blue of the apron, obtained from the costly natural ultramarine, shines with an almost sculptural depth. The ochre yellow of the bodice, illuminated by small pointed brushstrokes, seems to vibrate as if the fabric breathed. The breads on the table, painted with meticulous texture, show the grain, the crust, and the tiny shadows that confirm that Vermeer was capable of transforming the most humble things into an optical symphony. The whole scene is sustained by a perfect balance between the visible and the suggested. The background, which seems like a simple whitewashed wall, is built with layers of paint that create a unique tactile vibration, a roughness charged with centuries that multiplies the feeling of intimacy. Each object, from the wicker basket to the glazed ceramic jug, is painted with a precision that is not cold but devotional. Vermeer does not portray an interior, he consecrates it. The composition is another secret masterpiece. The diagonal formed by the woman's body leads the gaze toward the stream of milk, a white thread that concentrates time itself. The liquid falls slowly, but in the painting it falls eternally, and that eternity is one of the greatest achievements of the work. Vermeer captured a second that never exhausts itself. The viewer feels that if they blink, they will lose the magic, and yet they never lose it, because that gesture is trapped in an infinite loop, turned into ritual. The presence of domestic elements such as the bread basket or the foot warmer helps build an atmosphere of hard work and simple life. Nothing is superfluous, nothing distracts, and yet beneath that apparent simplicity, meanings are hidden that the master left for those who knew how to see them. For centuries, The Milkmaid was interpreted as a moralizing scene. In 17th century Holland, maidservants were common figures in moral iconography, often associated with the danger of desire and sexual temptation. Some objects could allude to this, such as toasted bread, which was sometimes associated with sensuality, or the jug, a symbol that in certain contexts carried erotic connotations. However, in this work Vermeer removes all insinuation. Facing an era that tended to sexualize or warn about maidservants, he constructs an image of dignity and serenity. His milkmaid does not seduce nor flirt, she works, and in that choice lies a silent revolution. Some modern critics have felt that Vermeer rewrites the role of the humble woman, granting her an ethical greatness that dismantles social prejudice. Others, more conservative, have insisted on finding hidden symbols of sensuality, but the dominant interpretation today recognizes that Vermeer sought precisely the opposite, the celebration of virtue in the everyday. The material history of the painting has been as intense as its symbolic reading. The painting suffered from the accumulation of dirt and yellowed varnishes for centuries, darkening the original atmosphere. Careful restorations in the 20th century removed these opaque layers, revealing purer colors and a more penetrating light. The blue of the apron recovered its ultramarine intensity. The yellow of the bodice shone again, and the bread's once dimmed, revealed their original warm tones. The wall, which was believed to be uniform, revealed a richness of nuances that demonstrated Vermeer's tactile mastery. A particularly revealing point was the discovery of nails and painted holes on the wall, details that had gone unnoticed, and that confirmed the painter's desire to represent the truth of the space, with its imperfections, its marks of use, and its silent memory. One of the greatest debates surrounding Vermeer has been the possible use of the camera obscura, an optical device that projected real images onto a surface. Some aspects of the painting, such as the extreme sharpness of certain objects or the luminous patterns that seem to capture real optical effects, have fueled the hypothesis. However, although Vermeer might have used optical tools, the extraordinary nature of the milkmaid cannot be explained by any mechanism. No camera can create that spiritual atmosphere, that gravity of silence, that suspension of time. Technique can assist, but never replace the poetic eye, and Vermeer saw beyond the visible. On a symbolic level, the painting has also received deeper interpretations. The woman's concentration, her slightly inclined posture, the fall of light on her face, the absolute serenity she conveys, have led some art historians to consider the work a tribute to the value of labor, a meditation on the virtue of constancy, a homage to the spirituality of the humble. Others have seen in the table covered with bread an Eucharistic allusion, a distant echo of the idea of sustenance, of the body that nourishes, and of the grace that pours over the everyday. Although it is not certain that Vermeer consciously sought this parallel, the association has endured for a powerful reason. The scene feels sacred without being religious. It is a domestic altar where light acts as priestess. There were also unexpected controversies. In the 20th century, some groups accused Vermeer of idealizing the working woman and transforming a hard labor into an image that was too polished, but serious criticism quickly rejected that reading. The milkmaid does not romanticize poverty nor standardize femininity. It dignifies human presence, shows concentration, strength, and the interiority that exist even in the simplest tasks. The greatness of the painting comes from its truth. Vermeer did not want to make propaganda nor idealize anything. He wanted to look with justice. Today, the work lives in the Rijksmuseum as one of the most precious treasures of universal art. The crowd that gathers before it keeps an unusual silence, as if the scene demanded respect. There is no loudness, no drama, no grand gestures, and yet, few paintings have such a deep power. The milk falls, the woman breathes, the light touches the surface of the bread, and in that instant, the entire world seems to align. The milkmaid is not a portrait nor a domestic scene. It is a human truth turned into light. A truth that does not age, because it is made of dignity, of stillness, and of that mystery that appears when an artist looks at reality as if it were sacred. That is why, centuries later, we continue to stand before her. Because in that woman who pours milk, in that suspended instant, in that luminous quiet, we find something that does not belong to the past. We find a truth of now, of always, a truth that speaks directly to the human heart. But the true miracle of the milkmaid does not reside solely in the technique, nor even in its inexhaustible light, but in the way Vermeer transforms a simple moment into a meditation on the human condition. The woman does not pose, she does not pretend, she does not act, she simply is. That serene presence, concentrated on the task of pouring milk, reveals a silent philosophy that runs through all Dutch art, but that in Vermeer reaches a unique clarity, as if in that small interior, a vision of the world were condensed in which the everyday possesses sacred dignity. The woman's posture, with her firm feet, her torso bent forward, and her arms holding the weight of the jug, expresses a quiet strength, an acceptance of the act she performs not as a burden, but as part of the natural rhythm of her life. Vermeer does not look down on her, he does not describe her condescendingly, but with absolute respect, granting her an interior monumentality that rivals any heroic figure in classical painting. The light in the painting is not only physical, it is moral. That clarity that enters through the left window does not illuminate objects, it reveals their essence. Each surface responds differently to the contact with light, reflecting not only an optical behavior, but a state of mind. The deep blue of the apron absorbs the light like a silent ocean. The osier tones of the bodice return it with earthly warmth. The ceramic jug reflects it in an almost liquid way, as if the light itself were mixing with the falling milk. This interaction between matter and radiance turns the milkmaid into a visual treatise on truth and humility. Everything that the light touches becomes ennobled, not by luxury, but by sincerity. And that sincerity is the key to the emotional impact of the painting. Silence is another invisible protagonist. There is no noise in the scene, no interruption. The woman is alone, but not isolated. The room seems to listen to her. The air still around her feels dense and warm. The falling milk seems to emit a sound so soft that it blends with breathing. And in that silence, Vermeer achieves something that very few painters have achieved to convey time. Not the accelerated time of work, but the inner time of the soul. The milkmaid is not in a hurry. She does not need to run. She is not being observed by anyone inside the painting. That isolation is a space of freedom. There in her concentration, the woman possesses a power she does not need to prove. Eternity filters through a delft window and settles on a wooden table. One of the most analyzed aspects is the psychological construction of the figure. Although we do not see her complete face, her contained, serene expression and her head slightly inclined toward the jug express an intimate relationship with her labor. There is no theatricality, no sentimentality, no drama. Her mind is present only in what she does, and that total presence has been interpreted by many historians as an early form of representing meditation in movement. The tiny inclination of her eyebrows, barely perceptible under the light, suggests introspection more than obedience. She is a woman who thinks, a woman with an inner world, something revolutionary for the context of her era. The possible identity of the model has also been discussed. Some believe she was a real maid from Vermeer's household. Others suggest she might have been a young woman from the family's environment, perhaps someone who worked in the kitchen of the house where the painter lived with his wife and numerous children. But all certainty dissolves because Vermeer did not seek to portray a specific person, but an idealized human type, a synthesis of honest and silent feminine labor. That absence of concrete identity turns her into a symbol. The milkmaid is not a woman, she is all the women who have supported life through simplicity. That is one of the reasons why the work moves so deeply. The figure does not belong to her century, she belongs to everyone. From a historical point of view, the painting has been constantly reinterpreted. In the 18th century, collectors saw it simply as a well-painted domestic scene. In the 19th century, with the resurgence of interest in Vermeer, it came to be seen as a gem of spiritual realism. In the 20th century, feminist readings discovered in it an affirmation of female dignity. In the 21st century, contemporary theories consider it a meditation on mindfulness and the poetics of the everyday. Each era has found in it what it needed, what it sought, or what it feared. And that does not diminish its meaning, but demonstrates its inexhaustible richness. The symbolism of the bread has generated numerous studies. In Dutch tradition, bread is sustenance, body, life. In the biblical context, it symbolizes spiritual nourishment. In Vermeer's aesthetic, bread acquires yet another dimension, stability. On the table, the pieces of bread appear firm, heavy, real, but they also possess a golden aura that elevates them. It is not exaggerated to say that Vermeer manages to turn them into small constellations of light. Some critics have spoken of a Eucharistic echo, not as a religious imposition, but as a spiritual resonance. The table becomes an altar, not because Vermeer wants to preach, but because he seeks to show that something sacred exists in the act of feeding, of pouring, of sustaining. Another dimension that has been revisited is the presence of the foot warmer, an object that in the era carried burning coals and that in certain artistic contexts was associated with the warmth of desire. Some 20th century critics insisted that Vermeer placed it to insinuate sensuality. However, recent studies have shown that this object appears frequently in Dutch interiors without erotic connotations, for it was simply part of everyday life. If Vermeer had wanted to suggest desire, he would have used other, more explicit symbols of Dutch moral iconography. The foot warmer here is not insinuation, it is domestic reality. Its symbolic function is to anchor the scene in common life, without moralism or forced allegories. Modern restorations have returned to the painting, a vitality that had been eroded by time. The cleaning of the opaque varnishes revealed details invisible for centuries: the small holes in the wall, the soft shine on the edge of the jug, the stitches of the blue apron, the minimal reflections on the bread. It was also discovered that Vermeer had corrected the position of the arm and the angle of the milk stream several times, seeking a perfect harmony between movement and stillness. These adjustments show that the supposed spontaneity of the gesture is not improvisation, but the result of a refined observation of the world. One of the most moving aspects is the spiritual dimension of the painting. Even for those who do not seek religious readings, the scene provokes a peace that is difficult to explain. The figure seems to inhabit a world where each action has a purpose, where each object finds its place, where light does not enter to display, but to caress. That balance between silence, work, and clarity turns The Milkmaid into a painting that is not only seen but breathed. Some viewers feel that when looking at it, the speed of thought decreases. Others claim it is one of the few works where you can hear the sound of light. And perhaps that is Vermeer's magic, his ability to show that true beauty does not need grandeur, but attention. In the end, The Milkmaid is a revelation of the hidden dignity in the common, of the value of silent labor, of the nobility of concentration, of light as a bridge between the visible and the invisible. It is a reminder that even in the humblest rooms, even in the smallest gestures, there exists a greatness that does not pass, that does not age, that does not need scandal or myth to remain. And that is why, centuries later, we continue to stand before her. Because in that woman who pours milk, in that suspended instant, in that luminous stillness, we find something that does not belong to the past. We find a truth of now, of always, a truth that speaks directly to the human heart.